issue that we have before us related to Kentucky housing. Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Senator Rocky Adams, Senator Higdon, Senator West, Senator Yates, Representative Bratcher,
Here.
Representative Bridges, Representative Burke,
Here.
Representative Kleins,
Here.
Representative Witten,
Here.
Senator Mills.
I'm here. All righty. We have a quorum and ready to got our listening ears on this morning. We got some good groups that are going to come before us to present this afternoon. Before we get started, I believe Representative Kleins might have a few visitors.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd like to recognize my Campbell County Judge Executive, Steve Pendry, and my Campbell County Deputy Judge Executive, Matt Eberfeld, and our Executive Director of the Northern Kentucky Area Development District, Tara Johnson-Noem. So welcome.
All righty. Well, welcome to our committee meeting and to Frankfort. Anybody else have guests that they'd like to recognize? All righty, we'll just jump right in. First item on our agenda is the Kentucky Chamber. Oh, yeah. As Chamber's moving up, do we have a motion on our minutes from our last meeting?
Motion.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our committee meeting, and the floor is yours. If you can introduce yourselves across the desk, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, chairs, members of the task force. I'm Kate Shanks. I'm Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for the Kentucky Chamber.
I'm Anitha Sanford. Anitha Sanford, the CEO and Executive Vice President of the Home Builders Association of Kentucky.
I'm Bob Thieneman, a developer from Louisville, Kentucky, and Executive Vice President of R.J. Thieneman Company.
Thank you, and thank you again for having us today. We've been looking forward to having this presentation. This is an issue that is becoming more and more important to the Kentucky Chamber and the business community, and we're really thrilled to be partnering with the Home Builders Association of Kentucky to present before you all today. And we have quite a bit of material that we want to share with you, and so I'm going to turn it over to Anitha. She's going to give you some updates from the association, some thoughts from the association, and then Bob's going to present, and then I will wrap it up with our report that we published in June, which you all should have received a copy of, but I'll walk through some of the data and analysis and policy recommendations in that report. So with that, I'll turn it over to Anitha.
So, of course, I'm Anitha Sanford with the Home Builders Association of Kentucky. We are a statewide organization. We represent about 4,000 member companies with a total of around 30,000 employees from across the state. A third of our members are builders and remodelers, and then the remaining amount of our members are those who support the industry in some form. So bankers, realtors, lumber dealers, building supply companies. And we partner, we have 18 local associations from across the state of Kentucky. You may know them as home builder associations, or in your area, they may be called the BIA or Building Industry Association. We were established, of course, in 1957 to be a voice for housing, building, and residential construction here in the state of Kentucky in the legislative and regulatory environment. We do believe in protecting the American dream of housing for everyone. And we also focus on supporting our members in the business that they do, building communities, creating jobs, as many of them are small business owners. Before I do get into some of the key challenges that come up during our meetings, I did want to point out one of the reasons why we felt we should do a study. As you all know, COVID happened, and many of our members were very aware of the housing shortage that was going to happen. And so they decided to support a housing study to educate the public as well as community leaders about housing in Kentucky in the current and future environment. So the key challenges, I want to start with workforce. And of course, this is no new news for you all. You all are very aware of the workforce shortage that we have here in Kentucky, specifically for our members in skilled labor. So carpenters, HVAC, electricians, plumbers. And when we have these shortages, That, of course, leads to construction delays, higher cost. But one of the things that we want to thank you for doing is continuing to invest in education pathways. Last year, you all supported and passed KEYS funding for trade schools. And I want to point out 3 specific trade schools that you all may or may not be familiar with that are building institutes that are funded, owned, and operated by our associations. One of them being the Ensweiler Building Institute in the Northern Kentucky area. It's one of the oldest trade schools in the state of Kentucky. They actually work in schools. Some schools in the Northern Kentucky area bus the students to their facilities. They have 2 of those facilities. It's a great growing program in Northern Kentucky. And then the Building Institute of Central Kentucky, that's in the greater Lexington area. Their program is a little unique as to where our members, HVAC companies, electricians, actually hire these students. They work during the day and then they go to school at night. It's a great program. And then the newest program is the Building Institute of Greater Louisville, providing, again, carpentry, HVAC, electrical classes. And so our members believe in these programs because, of course, this is their future employees. Another challenge, there's a upside, downside, as I like to say, regarding the economic impact. The upside, as we know, we do have an estimated shortage of 206,000 housing units, which Kate will report on later. But as we move forward with this, housing does create jobs. People are working. When people purchase a new home, they're going into furniture stores. They're helping support the economy. But oftentimes there can be a downside, which is if companies don't have housing or can't hire employees to come and work, that can put a hamper on our local economies. Planning and zoning is another challenge. I think oftentimes people think there's a piece of land and that homes can be built on it tomorrow. Development takes quite a bit of time, 2 to 3 years, and oftentimes longer, depending on the area. Of course, the longer the approval timelines are, and if there are changes after a development is submitted, then that can add significant cost to housing, which in turn is an additional cost to the customer, the consumer who is purchasing the home. But we are off to a great start, and I want to thank you all again for your support of House Bill 443 that passed this session. It does help. It's a great start at streamlining the development process here in Kentucky. And so if we have the communities, we have developers, and the leaders in those areas working together, we can create housing-friendly zoning. Lack of infrastructure. I know I've participated and listened in on some of these committee hearings, and I know with some of the cities and counties, you all have heard of lack of infrastructure. And that does affect our developers and builders as well. It helps in determine on whether they purchase a piece of land. Can I easily connect to sewers, or do I have to build out, which in turn is an additional cost to housing? And I would reiterate again how communities and developers and builders can partner together to work on Kentucky's housing needs. One program I did want to bring to your attention, in Indiana, they recently passed some legislation that created the Indiana Residential Infrastructure Fund. And what this fund does, they provided $75 million. They allocated that in their state budget. And it's low interest loans for communities to reduce the cost for infrastructure projects related to the development of residential housing in communities based on local job growth and housing-friendly zoning. They set aside $75 million for that, and the money went extremely fast, as you can imagine, in those communities. Regulatory barriers. That's a big challenge for many of our members, our developers and builders. It is estimated that 25% of a home's cost comes from regulations. Of course, that's permit fees, that's building codes, electrical codes, that's inspections, that's studies, engineering, all of those things that have to be done in order to create a piece of land to develop. An example is energy codes. Kentucky is currently on the 2009 Energy Code. It is estimated that if we move to the 2021 Energy Code, that it could increase the cost of housing of up to $21,000 with a 50 to 90 year return. And as we know, most people stay in their home on an average of 7 years. So we feel that their balance is needed, and we really do our best. We try to do our best to support safe but yet cost-effective codes. Additional challenges, of course, there are things that we can work on together. There are some things that are just out of our control. And so there is a shortage of land and lots. Inflation, of course, has created rising costs in construction, supply chain issues. I would say that's evened out a little bit for our members, but every now and then something may pop up. And then, of course, financing. But I'm going to turn it over right now, just briefly, to Bob, who does development here in Kentucky.
Thank you, Anitha. You've pretty much hit on just about everything. I don't know why I'm here, really. She just asked me to come. But I and my family have been in the development business for actually since the year I was born, 1958. A couple of you all may know some of my family members. Thieneman's kind of been a name in either construction or else fruit and vegetables for a long time. All 10 of my dad's siblings have been in the building or development or plumbing or framing or some part of the industry at some point in their lives, if not most of their lives. So now as second generation, we've been working on how to transition that into third generation, and it is getting more and more difficult. Our family has expanded into commercial properties. We actually own Franklin Square here in Frankfurt. We have a property in most of our commercial properties have been working on Kroger-anchored shopping centers, and that still seems to be doing pretty well, although that too has some challenges regulation-wise. But on the residential side, that challenge seems to have been growing and growing over about the last 20 years. I think Anitha's gone through some of the various sectors of it, but basically land development on the residential side is difficult if we have all the answers up front, but we never have all the answers up front. Usually if we're working on our project now called Hirschburn Commons. I started looking at the property maybe 10 years ago. But you have to go through everything from financing to infrastructure, feasibility studies, traffic studies, environmental, and then of course, even if you have what you think is the proper zoning in place, you still have neighbors. And one of the things that could be very helpful is better education, maybe of the public to understand the need for housing and price points of housing. Most of our stuff has typically been middle or upper end homes anyway, but even at whatever price point you're at, it seems more and more difficult to not have the NIMBY system in place. So I don't know. How can I add anything to this? I don't know. We really need to have some way to have certainty when we look at a piece of property. We need to have more flexibility at the same time. And I know those seem opposites of each other, but if the prices of homes, if the cost of the labor isn't going to go down, it doesn't appear that it's going to, and if the cost of the land certainly doesn't appear to be going down, then everybody's talking about how to fix things, how to make like the middle-priced homes available to people. We need some type of a collaborative effort so that the general public understands that even in their neighborhood, they need more flexibility in terms of housing styles. We need certainty. In Louisville, Kentucky, that's called R4 zoning. That's kind of a minimum allowed zoning for a developer to purchase a piece of land. I'm talking about residential-wise, single-family homes. But if you have R4 land, 4.84 units per acre as an example, which is what it is, could be transferred into a more flexible housing style where you could maybe create a little more open space, reduce the cost of the sticks and bricks, but still give people what they want. Or another way of saying it is, please help the private sector figure out the best way to build affordable homes to the extent that it's possible. There'll always be a need for the public, the help of the government to help us with assistance financially. But the support as a private developer in Louisville, Kentucky, I'm suggesting we need more flexibility with the laws that are in place now. We certainly don't need any additional regulation. As she said, 25%. I think it's getting higher than that. I was just looking up. We were talking over lunch how many people get put out of the housing market when a new home goes up by $1,000. In the state of Kentucky, the average is about 2,000 people. $1,000, 2,000 people in Kentucky cannot afford a home as a result of an increase. Every time there's a new regulation that, or there's a it's just getting tough. You've heard enough from me. I think she hasn't kicked me yet, but that's really all I could add to this, I think.
Thanks, Bob. So ultimately, like I had mentioned before, I think you probably heard a theme about collaboration with developers, builders, and local communities. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Kate to actually touch on the report.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Bob. That was really helpful. And the Chamber, of course, is eager to be here to have this conversation. And we started down this path last year talking about housing because we were hearing about it so much from our members and from our local chambers of commerce, which are in all of your communities. That, what is the chamber doing about housing? What are you all doing about this issue? And I came and talked to some of you all about it and let you know that we were doing this study. And our interest here is to think about a couple of things. One, economic development. Because the General Assembly, you all are doing great work around growth and passing pro-growth policies. We're talking a lot about growing our population. We're talking about things like the tax code and our workforce challenges. And we're also talking a lot about quality of life. And how do we address quality of life issues around having a good place for your family and where you want to raise your family if you already live in Kentucky or you're looking to come here. And so we partnered with the home builders to do this work. It was done by our Center for Policy Research, Center for Policy and Research, where we help inform policy discussions that you all are grappling with at any given time as policymakers. And one of the things I want to stress when we work on these types of things is, one, is it something the business community cares about? Yes. And two, are there opportunities from a policy standpoint to remove barriers or to create opportunities? And we think there are, and that's why we're here and that's why we're at the table. So to tell you a little bit about our study, there's two parts to it in the sense of quantitative and qualitative analysis. So if you're somebody that likes to dive into the data and charts, we have something for you in this report. We cite a lot of existing research from groups with different ideological backgrounds to really pull all different perspectives in it. And then one of the things that we do when we're studying a new issue is we get out of Frankfurt, get out of our little bubble and out into the state and have conversations with local leaders and officials and stakeholders that care about these issues. And we call up our local chambers. Will you host us? They bring us in and we do our listening tour through the local chamber network. We don't hit them all. There's around 100 of them in the state. So we're not in every community, but anytime we're studying a new issue, we do take the time to have those conversations out in the state. And what we're looking for is feedback from folks in the room about their own personal experiences on how they're handling something. We do live polling in the room so that we can capture everybody's opinions, not just those that feel comfortable speaking. And then we can compile all the results and look to see if there's regional differences or if there's a common thread throughout the state. And I would say on housing, there's a common thread here throughout the state. This is not just something that impacts urban areas, it impacts rural areas as well. And there is this desire and this demand for additional housing throughout the communities of Kentucky. So let's talk a little bit about supply. I know Anita mentioned that 206,000 number. You've heard it before in this task force, and that is an estimate of what our shortage looks like. But this is a graph to show you kind of how we got there. Those light blue bars, 95 to on through the whole graph, but they start to dip down around 2008. These are permits being issued for single family and multifamily housing. And so this is a proxy for housing construction that we use. And so we're looking at permits. And you can see up until that's the Great Recession, we were seeing around 19,000 permits being issued per year, with a high of around 22,000 permits being issued. And then we saw the Great Recession, and you know the effects that that period had on the housing market. And we saw a significant decline of around 45%, which was not specific to Kentucky. This was a national effect from the recession. And what we've done is we've taken the average pre-recession permitting and plotted that forward in time to show you if we had maintained that average of around 19,000 permits issued. That dark blue bar chart is what you would see for each year. So the gap between the dark blue and the light blue is showing you how that shortage has developed over time. And if we had maintained that average of around 19,000, we would have about 125,000 more permits issued over that period, or new housing constructed over that period. So this is an example of a really great graphic in the report that helps you understand the situation that we're dealing with in Kentucky. And so now we're averaging, because I'm going to come back to this number, about 10,000 permits per year. We're starting to see it tick up a little bit, though, in the last couple of years. But if you look at the average over the past few years, that's where our housing sort of hole came from. And then let's talk about affordability, because this is obviously what you are hearing from your constituents, I'm sure, is when it comes to affording a home, whatever type of home that they're looking for, it's getting more and more expensive. This proves out in the data. Here we're looking at the average home price, the median home price in a particular area of the state relative to the median income in that area, comparing 1992 and 2022. And so you can see that in some parts of the state, that light blue bar, back in the 90s, you got to go back to the 90s, you were looking at around 2 times the household income for the average price of a home. That has now, in some areas, almost doubled, or in some cases has doubled. And you can see it's now upwards of 4, even 5 times the household income. And that's where we're seeing the shortage of housing play out. Definitely household incomes have been creeping up as well. They've been growing, but not at the same rate that the price of housing in those regions has grown at. So this is a depiction of what your constituents, what Kentuckians are feeling when it comes to the housing market. I mentioned our listening tour, and we had several questions that we asked of the folks in the room that attended those. And one of them was, if a major economic investment came, if it was announced tomorrow and there were 1,000 jobs coming to your community, would you have the housing to support it? Not surprisingly, about 90% said no, we don't have the housing to support that. And I know you did hear from officials in Hardin County that have recently had some major economic news, and we love to hear about these new economic developments. But I think there's been some good conversation with local officials around how do you plan for that. So we aren't taking our foot off the gas when it comes to economic development. I know you aren't as well. And so how do we help communities prepare and meet the needs and plan in a way that the community wants to plan, because this economic growth is coming to Kentucky. And one of the reasons, I'll show you a couple more for my data people in the room. The top left map of the United States, that census data showing you where people are moving from, the red, to where they're moving to, the blue dots. And we're seeing quite a bit of growth in the southeastern United States. And Kentucky did grow. We saw growth in the last census, not at the same rate as the national average, but we did see growth. We're seeing growth in Tennessee, Florida, of course, the Carolinas. And so we're thinking a lot about how that growth will ultimately bleed into Kentucky as well. And so we did a forecast of what our housing needs should be in the future. So we know we have this hole of some level, and there's different estimates out there and different models about what our shortage looks like. But let's project forward in time what we're going to need. So if you look to the right, that chart that shows the 2008 to 2022 averaged about 10,973 permits. We did a moderate growth forecast and a robust growth forecast to determine how many permits would need to be generated and therefore housing produced in order to keep up with the growth that we expect to see in Kentucky. And under the moderate growth scenario, we're looking at data from the State Data Center at the University of Louisville, and then we look for the robust growth. We're doubling it. with an expectation that we're going to see more pro-growth policies. The Southeast is going to continue to grow, and we're going to see that growth here in Kentucky. And if you look at those numbers, think back to that chart I just showed you, 19,000 or so. We just got to go where we've been before in terms of construction. Of course, these are forecasts. You don't know what the future holds. But we do know, regardless of all the different variables, we do know we need to grow more housing. We need to produce more housing in Kentucky. Lots of conversation in this task force about workforce, and Anitha touched on it as well. You'll see that dip around the Great Recession, where we saw declines in the construction industry, and this is excluding self-employed, so it's going to be a little bit bigger when you consider self-employed folks. But we have recovered from that, but keep in mind that our economy has grown since then. This was like 15 years ago. Additionally, you have a lot of demands on the construction industry right now because we've seen a lot of investment in infrastructure. I mean, this General Assembly has invested in infrastructure. We've seen federal investment in infrastructure. That is not simply the construction industry for residential housing. So we do need to continue to focus on workforce, but I will say you all as a policy body, you're focusing on workforce quite a bit. I mean, we bring you legislation every year tackling these issues, and so you continue to care about this, and we appreciate that. And then looking at our listening tour, another graphic to show you if middle-income family of four was interested in moving to your community, how easy do you think it would be for them to find housing? And the majority, of course, thought it would be difficult for them to find housing. So again, people locating to Kentucky, coming to Kentucky, are they going to find a spot in your community for their family of four? So let's talk about a few policy solutions, and Anitha touched on some of these. Explore and encourage local land use and zoning reforms. Emphasis on explore and encourage. So we see this as a collaborative exercise. We know that there is a strong local piece to housing. There is a lot of local engagement and involvement. A lot of Kentuckians live in areas where there is planning and zoning. So, the Chamber of Commerce is not going to show up in a community and make those decisions on behalf of the citizens. But there are ways that you can encourage modernizing some of the processes in place on planning and zoning. And Anitha mentioned the Indiana model, and that's something that we've looked closely at that we would hope you all would look at as well, because that could be a way to create some incentives to work with the communities to look at modernizing those zoning standards while also addressing another issue on there, which is infrastructure, which we know is a cost driver for housing. Consider how government regs and impact housing and implement reforms. Are we talking about wiping out all regulations on the books? Of course not. But to the extent that Kentucky has rules on the books that are more stringent than federal or more stringent than surrounding states, do we have a reason for that? Or is that just something that's been on the books for years and we could potentially change it? And then looking forward to new regulations and making sure that they have an appropriate role in Kentucky for that. Leveraging tax incentives, taxpayer-funded support. You think about the low-income housing tax credit. Some states have developed a similar model that they've used, or they've developed something similar around workforce housing. Regional approaches. There's another great model out of Indiana that addresses some of these regional approaches and how you can encourage that. And you've heard some testimony in this committee about that. I think it was up in Northern Kentucky where they talked about you've one area of a region where you see a lot of economic growth, jobs being created, and maybe there's a surrounding county or community where you're going to see a lot of the housing to support those jobs. Helping communities understand their housing needs. This is where you get into planning or doing housing studies at the local level, and some cities are starting to do that. So, thinking back to that, are you ready for the 1,000 jobs coming to your community? No, we're not ready. Well, how do you get ready? Doing some of that planning for that growth. Investing in infrastructures. This, of course, it's been discussed significantly. It does drive up some of the costs of housing, and then growing the workforce, as we've mentioned, not taking your eye off the ball on that. Anitha mentioned the program out of Indiana where you set up that revolving loan fund. The local entity that's utilizing it takes some steps to improve their planning processes, to modernize, and then they're able to make investments in infrastructure and residential housing sites that have already been identified or being identified in the community. So it's sort of a carrot approach. The workforce, you've done great work around work-ready scholarships, and construction is one of those top 5 in demand. sectors that can utilize Work Ready, and you've increased funding in that. So thank you for prioritizing that. You've done great work on the Kentucky Educational Excellence Scholarship Program, KEYS, around proprietary schools, where a lot of the individuals who will go into the construction industry may go through some of those proprietary schools. So thank you for focusing on that, and we will continue to work on workforce issues on behalf of the business community. Impacted government regulations, we've done work on this with you all on making sure we're not more stringent in certain areas. And then the regional approaches to housing. This is another program that was done in Indiana under the READY model, where they did create a fund where local communities could form partnerships to do something beneficial in their community. And in some cases, that could be housing, residential housing. So you could combine that first bullet and that second bullet, and you could do some kind of fund, revolving loan fund to support infrastructure. And then maybe there's a piece where you're encouraging regional collaboration. I know a lot of our local chambers are doing a lot of regional work in their parts of the state, working with their counterparts at other chambers to do that. So sometimes our county boundaries are not so visible. People travel from one county to another to work. And so creating housing around that structure, I think, is important. And then lastly, we asked our participants in our listening tour, like, what do you want to see in your community? Like, what type of housing? The majority of people said we wanted all different types of housing. And I think recognizing that their community supports that and that they have families that want different types of housing. But you'll also see on here, there's a priority for dealing with dilapidated properties and abandoned homes. Can we renovate and update existing housing stock that's kind of part of the vacancy equation? And then also, of course, supporting working families that are looking for housing as well. But the majority are saying, yes, we need all different types of housing when we tour the state. And then you, of course, can get a hold of our report if we haven't already sent it to you multiple times, which is likely the case. kychamber.com/housing. Grab that report. It's got a lot of great stuff, and I'm not going to touch on all of it today, but I think you'll find a lot of great information, as well as examples from other states about different policies, including those Indiana models that I mentioned as well. With that, happy to take any questions.
All right, what we're going to do is just take give you all a few questions, and then we'll move on to our next presenters, but we may have more question time at the end. But Senator Adams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be quick. I was just curious, what do you consider to be the cost of an entry-level home? We'll take Jefferson County since that's where I'm from.
Dollar amount.
I mean, how
So
much?
like a starter home. So if a 25-year-old kid has his, first job and he wants to make his home Louisville, what would it cost him to find that first home?
The majority of our homes that are starter homes are being built by people other than myself. First of all, we're more on the custom side, but there are about 4 or 5 builders that are either national builders or regional builders that pretty much dominate the entry-level housing market. And so I may be out of line telling you their price, but I'm going to guess, if lucky, to get something under $400,000.
I was just with one of our members who a larger builder, and they're of course coming down in size. But if you're looking at like a 1,200 square foot home, right now it's starting at about $260,000.
Okay, yeah, because one of the things I'm just really passionate about is allowing people to get out of the rental market and to build wealth through home ownership. Right. And I think everybody would aspire that should be one of our goals as elected officials, is to allow people to start to build wealth through that. So you would say in the mid 250s to 400s. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Representative Bratcher.
Just 3 quick ones. Okay, on the slides you had population you had United States, red and blue right there. Now that is, the blue is where the jobs are, the population.
Where people are moving.
That's where they're moving. So it's like Tennessee,
Southeast.
Charlotte, Florida, and
Florida.
Texas. And is that Nevada down there in the left? Okay, and they're leaving California and New York and Seattle, I guess. Okay, I just want. Where can we get that picture right there?
It's in our report, but we can get it for you. I mean, it's from census research, but I can get you that.
On that second to last slide, you had that. You asked some folks about vacancy. You know, we got a lot of empty buildings, and as people keep going to Amazon, you're going to have all these, and people work at home. Like, I mean, I heard some horror stories about Humana in that building. You know, about nobody's coming to work and they're working at home. What, that can't just be converted to apartments or whatnot? I'm just throwing that out there. We don't need a long discussion on it.
No, yes, and that's one of the things that we've talked about. And actually, in the Indiana model, we referred to that's one of the things that we could get infrastructure for. They call it adaptive housing in some form, where you can convert, commercial to residential. So
It
yes,
seems like there's a lot of vacancies. And then the last one is, you know, I'm just going to ask the word, and I don't want to start a controversy or anything, but undocumented, illegal, whatever word you want to say it, immigration coming in, is that part of the affordable housing problem? Do you know?
What do you mean by a part of the problem? You mean the demand?
I mean, is that causing the lack of affordable housing? I mean, I don't know. You can't ever seem to get. I don't even think Kentucky can track undocumented folks. But is that adding to the problem? Is it as it's growing, or is that? Seems like we don't talk about that.
I would imagine that the affordable housing programs under HUD would have certain requirements for documentation. So I think that might be a group that could better answer some of those questions. You know, when we deal with immigration and those issues around workforce, we're talking about people who are documented, that are legally in our country, they're participating in the workforce, things of that nature. But I would think there'd be some requirements under those federal programs.
Because you hear about there's so many coming, you know, and I'm not down there on the border. I don't know if that's happening, but it just seems like it is. And they've got to live somewhere. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, all right, that's it.
Yeah. I think there's no doubt that when 10 million people come in our nation, that they're taking up some housing stock there. Senator Yates has our last question.
First of all, thank you. And I'll go on the slides. I like to do my own, so I'll answer my own questions, some of it, and thank you for presenting again today. One of the things, the money that we used in the budget this past year was to just do that, to convert so many of the vacant office spaces into housing and hopefully kind of get that introductory market. But I think one thing that we talk about is we have a demand at all levels of housing. So while we may be addressing the apartments and making sure that we have a roof over some heads, and even for affordable, you have to have middle class housing and market housing, even upper level, to stabilize it. And so in order to, I know we talk about the incentives for affordable housing and some of the tax credits and stuff. Is there a proposal to have additional tax incentives as we go to develop additional middle class housing and other things as well? Is that part of the request here today?
Yeah, you want to answer? There's some examples in the report on, you know, that I think sometimes we hear is workforce, missing middle, different types of housing. There are some funds that could be created, that some states have created. There are some tax credit programs that exist for low income that could be replicated for that next income bracket up, I think is what you're talking about, that could be helpful in that space. And thinking about the chart that I showed you about the affordability piece, where there's such a gap between income, average income, as well as the price of housing now, and that wasn't there in the 90s. And so you might have to look at those higher income bands for how you want to produce some programs. So yeah, there's examples from other states, and there's examples in our report for that.
What I was touching on is on the previous meetings, that's what we kind of talked about, is if there's any chain missing along there, it makes
a mess.
It's disproportionate. Yeah. And so if we're missing the workforce housing or the missing middle, it makes it harder for affordable housing. And if there's not enough affordable housing, it makes it harder for the missing middle. And so sometimes we get different people testifying about the different areas, and I was just kind of looking for a synergy together.
No, we agree with that. We agree. And when you think about the shortage and the demand for housing in Kentucky, it's all levels. We do agree with that, because it does potentially have a domino effect if people are stuck at this level or here. And, you know, we're hearing about that now with rates, with interest rates. People aren't going to move. They're not going to leave their rate. So those are some of the realities we have to deal with. And so from our standpoint, well, let's focus on construction, let's build all different types of housing.
I'm with you. Thank you.
Well, very good. I think your report was very timely for this committee, and I think it's interesting too. I heard Kate say multiple times that we've kind of nibbled around the edges on a lot of these subjects. We're hearing that, and we've just got to figure out what we can do as a body to move the needle to actually get results. I think we've kind of been nibbling around on a lot of the issues. So thank you for your report and presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next is the Louisville Apartment Association. Mr. Carey, right? Okay. All righty. If you can introduce yourselves, and the floor will be yours. If you can hit the button, make sure the green light's on.
Okay, sorry about
There
that.
you go. Yes.
So I am J.D. Carey. I'm the director of the Apartment Association of Kentucky. I do want to thank Representative Whitten and Senator Mills and the whole committee to allow me to come and talk about multifamily today. So we are the Apartment Association is a trade association that exists to promote the interests of persons, firms, corporations who develop, own, manage, or supply goods and services to the multifamily industry. Our industry provides Kentuckians with one of the most fundamental of all needs, a place to call home. We have 4 affiliates in the state. In my office, I have the Apartment Association of Kentucky. I also cover Louisville Apartment Association and Bowling Green Apartment Association. We also have the Central Kentucky Apartment Association, which is Lexington, and then the Greater Cincinnati Northern Kentucky Apartment Association that covers part of the Northern Kentucky up there. So I wanted to give you a little bit of update on the impact of multifamily from across the state. Kentucky Apartments and their residents contribute $23 billion to the state economy annually, and they support 132,800 jobs. The operations of Kentucky's apartments that contributes the $874 million to the local economy, which includes $188.5 million in property taxes a year. To break that down into a city like Louisville, their apartments and their residents contribute $11 billion to the metro economy annually and support 58,400 jobs. But the operations of those apartment homes contribute $403 million to the local economy, including $94.2 million to property taxes. Age of stock. So you have a kind of an understanding of our rental in Kentucky. So for Kentucky, we're 37% of all of our rental stock was built before 1980. Break that down to Louisville, it's 43% of Louisville stock. It was built before 80. So we all know that we need more housing, and that's why we're here. It's all types of housing. It's from low income to the high end, single family to multifamily. And I just want to be clear that as I give you my presentation, that I'm not in any way saying that we don't have need for single family homes, because we do. I just represent multifamily, so a lot of my stuff's going to be reflected as multifamily, but we definitely need the single family homes. So occupancy across the state. So the state right now is at 93.5% occupied of their rental units. This does not mean that 6.5% of all rental units in Kentucky are sitting empty, not leased. At this percentage, most of them the vacants are already pre-leased. They're in the turn cycle. They're being turned, ready for the next person to move in. These numbers change daily. This is just the percentage that we pulled to get an average. Louisville is sitting at 92%. Bowling Green 92.9, Lexington 93.3. So Kentucky occupied rental units. So in Kentucky, we're looking at from 22, and I do want to tell you that I have numbers through 22. The 23 numbers will actually be out the 1st of November. So I'm happy to update you on the 23 numbers as soon as they come out. So when we break this down, we broke it into 5+ units, which is multifamily, is what we consider. 1 to 4 units is going to be more of your single family homes that are rented, your duplexes, fourplexes, that type of thing. So we did have a 3.2% growth in 2022 of our 5+ units. Nationally, we're above the national average, which was 2.6%. Of the bordering states, we had Ohio was 1.6%, Indiana was 2.3%, and Tennessee experienced a little bit higher growth than us at 3.9%. One thing I do want to point out, and that's something that needs to be paid attention to, is if you look at the 1 to 4 units occupied in Kentucky, in 22, even though we brought in 5,786 new units occupied in 22 of 5+ units, we lost 5,772 units that are 1 to 4 units. So 22 had a great growth, but we were awash because of what we lost in 1 to 4 units. The reasons for this is that we had a lot more people that had rental units that sold the rental unit. So it was either that they sold to someone that's not going to turn around and rent it out again, but using it as their personal home, or we've had some that have moved back into these rental units and taken them off the market as a rental unit. So we're doing, we are increasing, but we're also having a wash of what we're losing in multifamily. So owner occupied, we had a 1.7% increase for owner occupied, which is 1 unit in the state of Kentucky. It's right in line with the national levels because the national was 1.7 as well. Ohio was 1.2, Indiana was 1.5, and Tennessee was a 2.2% growth in occupied units, owner occupied units. Age of renter households, under 35 of age has the largest percentage of renters in Kentucky, and that's at 36.5%. So 36.5% of all of our renters are 35 years or younger. Nationally, that level is 34.8% of renters. Tennessee is at 37.9%, and Indiana is at 38.4% of all renters are under the age of 35. The majority of renter households in Kentucky that are under the age of 45 are 54.6%. Nationally, that's 54.5. Tennessee is 57.3, and India's 56.2. This is the age for the renters in our state. The age of owner households, we come in at nationally, the majority of our households are under the age of 45. Or majority of our homeowners are age 45 and older, sorry. That percentage is higher than national. National homeowners under 45 was 26.5. Over was 73.4% of owners are aged 45 or older. Kentucky, under the age of 45 was 26.7%. Over the age of 45 is 73.3% of the homeowners. Tennessee, under 45, 26.3. Over was 73.7, and Indy was 29.5 under 45, and 70.5% were over the age of 45. Renter household incomes. The median household income for Kentucky for renters is $37,000 a year in 2022. 62.5% of renters in Kentucky have incomes below $50,000. On the national level, that's 51% of renters have an income below $50,000. Tennessee is 58.2, and India is 61.1% of all renters having an income below $50,000. So that results in about 1 in 10 renter households in Kentucky earn more than $100,000 a year. So 1 in 10. So the homeowner median for the year was $74,000 in Kentucky. If you look at homeowners that with income under $50,000 in Kentucky was 32.7. So national was 24.6, Tennessee is 30.1, and India is 27.2. And these are homeowners' incomes in the state of Kentucky. So when you talk about apartments, I want to give you a little bit of a breakdown of what it takes to run multifamily. And the National Apartment Association did this where they took $1 of rent and broke that down into what it actually cost to run multifamily. So for every $1 of rent, 50 cents of that dollar goes to operating expenses, which is payroll, insurance, taxes, it can be utilities, their repair and maintenance. All of those together end up with 50 cents per dollar. The capital expenditure reserve is 3 cents per dollar. Mortgage payments add up to 42 cents per dollar, with the total expenses at 95 cents a dollar. So that leaves 5 cents for every dollar is a profit. And it could be for the loss, but it's for the profit. That's for every dollar it's paid in rent. So we know we need to build more single-family homes, and we know we need to build more multifamily, larger communities to keep up with the demand. Some of what we're missing is that middle housing, which was brought up earlier. This housing is between the single-family and the multifamily, and this consists of duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts. It could be courtyard buildings, live and work buildings. It's essential for creating diverse and affordable housing options. They maintain the scale and sense of lower density of homes. So we need to promote this missing middle as long as we look at housing plus the single family and the multifamily. This doesn't mean that this middle housing is rental. Some of it is rental and can be rental, but it doesn't mean that all is rental, because these townhomes, duplexes, they could be sold and able to be built more affordably and sold. So I did want to show. Sorry. So as we go through the path forward to addressing our supply, zoning, and streamline land use and regulations. So zoning is an important component of the regulatory landscape. Zoning can be used to regulate the compatibility of uses, safeguard public health and natural resources, and regulate how a plot of land can be used. It ranges across single-family homes and multifamily residential with mixed use. Zoning determines the size, shape, and design of the building that can be built to accommodate that use. And finally, zoning determines who makes the decision to approve the project based on a set of criteria and whether or not a public hearing is required as part of the specialized process. We should analyze and update property use regulations to legalize a broader range of housing options and supply to effectively serve the current changing needs of our communities. Streamlining the permitting process. Lengthy permitting process add cost, time, and uncertainty to housing construction. Fast-tracking review and permitting of housing is at no cost for jurisdictions to expand their supply. And permitting delays can kill projects. And we see that happening a lot. We can reduce parking requirements. Parking requirements are one of the biggest costs for development. The Urban Land Institute found that parking minimums were the number one barrier in building affordable housing. So growing transportation alternatives and evolving residential preferences are good reasons to review and amend parking requirements that may not meet current needs. Reduce lot size. These codes mandate that each home include a certain amount of land regardless of the owner's preference. Research has shown that such rules raise home prices by forcing buyers to purchase large, more expensive parcels and reduce the barrier number of homes that can be built on that parcel. We need to allow for townhomes and small lot homes. Allow your transit-rich corridors to turn into functional mixed-use communities. Allow multifamily and mixed-use development in all commercial areas. In most cases, areas that are zoned for commercial meet all the criteria making multifamily housing and mixed-use development successful and beneficial. Encourage multifamily development in these zones. Also, bring residents closer to desired amenities and reduces the transportation impact of new housing. Well, I can't get it to go back. Diverse residential use types. Expand the list of residential use types permitted in neighborhoods to include non-traditional and missing middle housing, including modest-scale multifamily residences. These housing types include duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and courtyards. This is a graphic that was given to us at a housing conference that I attended recently, and it was to show if you had a city block and it was zoned for single family homes, they fit 12 single family homes on this block. If this same block was rezoned and allowed for townhomes, they fit 38 townhomes on the same amount of space that the 12 homes were on. So it just shows that kind of having a diverse way of zoning can kind of help to build and take care of some of the need that we have for the housing. So large lot zoning, minimum house size requirements, higher parking minimums, and higher open space requirements make property more expensive, and it limits the number of low-income households who can afford to use, own, or occupy neighborhoods within these communities. Not only renters who benefit when communities build more apartments and housing, communities benefit as well. When people are able to affordably live where they work, the volume of traffic is reduced. When a community has a diverse housing stock, it can attract a diverse population of people with different incomes, skill sets, and professions. And apartments can help the tax base and boost the local economy through mixed-use development that revitalizes communities and creates jobs. Insufficient housing causes workers to leave an area or lose productivity because of long commutes. Companies relocate or stagnate when they cannot hire workers they need because their employees can't find housing. Ensuring a community has enough housing isn't just the concern of those who struggle to find housing, it's an important issue to everyone in the community. What's good for renters is good for everyone. And that's why we take the stance that it's time to take action to ensure every household at every income level has a quality place to call home. So thank you. So if there's any questions.
Sure, very good. Mr. Carey,
Yes.
If before we start our questions, if you can make sure you get that summary to our staff at the end, I think that would be very good for our report.
Sure.
At the end. We've got several questions here. Try to make them go fast. First is Co-Chair Witten.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Carey, for this presentation. I do want, if you could go back to the slide that says Kentucky occupied rental units. If you could do that. On one side, it had the occupied rental units of 5+.
It's not wanting me to let me go back.
There we go. A few more.
There it is.
There we go. Yeah, that's it. This was really interesting to me because I think most of us, we see large apartment complexes. I'm from Louisville. We see they're going up pretty consistently. And so there's a disconnect between how can we be losing units year after year when we keep seeing development. And what this shows me is that the private owner, somebody, they're getting out of the market. The last 4 years, we have lost everything we've gained from the 5+ from the private market. Is there something that we are doing that is disincentivizing these private property owners from continuing to be, to rent their property?
Well, you're seeing a lot of this is coming from the effect of COVID. The more regulation and the more things that are put in place against landlords, the more that they are trying to get out of renting. When we had the eviction moratoriums and they weren't getting rent and things like that, it was they couldn't keep that up. When a landlord doesn't get rent, they still have to pay the mortgage payment. They still have to pay the insurance, the upkeep. And if they're not getting the rent in, they're not able to do that. And so we're starting to see a lot more people sell. And these are going to be more small mom and pops that have a few units, maybe have a couple of houses. We're also seeing maybe the kids are moving into the rental houses and that the parents haven't taken those off the market. So that's what we're seeing a lot of. Doesn't mean that the demand is not there. The demand is there. It's just that the landlords have chosen to get out of the market and to keep renting. And because of the shortage of the homes that are up for sale, these people that are buying these homes are buying them to live in, not to turn around and rent out again. And so that's where we're seeing that shift of the people selling out.
Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Bratcher.
So, JD, do you track term lengths? Like, say an apartment has a 1-year term and a 6-year term, and then I've heard rumors, I don't know if it's true, that some are selling like 1-month terms in Louisville. Are you familiar with any of that?
Well, I don't know about the 6-year. That's
not 6 weeks. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, 6 months.
6 months. Yeah.
12 months, 6 months, and then 1 month is what I'm hearing, because that's what actually some law enforcement have said. If you want to find where the crime is in your area, go to the 1-month leased apartments. Got families, and I'm sure there's unfortunate circumstance they can only do 1 month at a time. And I'm just curious if you guys track that, if you can shed any light on that.
I can probably get some of those numbers pulled for you.
Have you heard of it?
Well, the month to month, a landlord could choose to do month to month. It's not. I wouldn't say that it's popular to do that for a lease. We do a 6 month. There are people that might be relocating for work and just need a place to get by until they can get here, figure out where they want to live, take the job, and then move. But most of multifamily is going to be year terms with leasing. But the month to month usually comes at the end of your term. So if somebody had a year lease and at the end of that term they could choose to go month to month, which is that's more in guidelines of multifamily than renting a house out for a month.
Thank you.
So,
Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. On the availability and looking at what's coming off the market and everything, and this may follow up to what Representative Bratcher was talking about. What about the short-term rentals, weekly rentals, things of that nature? Has that, like Airbnb, VRBO, do you feel like that's affected the market? People taking monthly rentals off because they can get as much in a week as they normally can in a month if they furnish it, and the return on that investment is much greater. So just wondering if you've seen, has that effect? Do you feel like that's been an effect on
I mean, it could in some of the single family homes and things, that could have a little bit of a weight. As far as multifamily, we'll still show that as occupied, because most of the time when it's a multifamily building and they have some short-term rental units that someone's leased out to then do short-term rentals with people, that still shows as an occupied apartment. It won't show as a vacant, because they actually rent that space to turn around to rent it out for short term.
Okay. One more, and this goes to low income housing. Are there any kind of requirements for low income housing to where the person has to have been in the area for a certain amount of time? I know there's some areas have started looking at this, because I mean they've got people being bussed in because they're known for having easier term, and no requirements or anything. I've just heard a little about this, so I'm just looking to see what the validity is of that, or would there be a use to, in your low turn housing, you have to be in this community for a certain amount of months or weeks or years before you, so that they just don't jump from community to community to community to do that. Or in our local area, we get a lot from Memphis and Chicago, and they just send them to the bus stop here because they say it's easy to get housing.
Yeah, I think that would be a change in our fair housing laws. We're under fair housing laws with our rentals in Kentucky, and so there's certain things that we have to abide by with fair housing. I think that could start to be a violation of those unless fair housing laws were changed to for a requirement like that.
Okay.
So
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. JD, thank you for being
Yep.
here as always. I know I've tried to mess a little bit with real estate, and I'm always here to learn and talking about some of it through COVID and the problems and having to go back to the bank and refinance, because when people aren't working, then they can't pay the rent and come back in. So I definitely see the effects. I wanted to bring the positive on that is we're really starting to resurge and come back onto it. What I wanted to hyper focus on, and something we talked a lot about, and I think we earmarked about $30 million for, is the conversion of some of the office spaces into the apartments and the things. And I know you're running into some roadblocks, and some of that is with zoning, the requirements that you would have as an office to residential. And I was thinking, just jotting some notes, if maybe there could be some changes that we could make here at the state level as it relates to conversions to kind of push us in place. And I know that Cincinnati's done a really good job. I guess they've hit about 1,500 quickly, recently, but maybe some slight changes if it relates to office that has been being converted into apartments, individual, and maybe there should be some changes in place, and thought maybe that's something that we could work with some of your organizations.
I mean, yes, because we need that type of housing. And we find that the younger generation, that's the type of housing that they're looking for. They want the lofts. They want the non-traditional type units. They want to work, play, eat, sleep, all in the same place. They want to be in that area. That's why we see some of the parking requirements to be changed, because they're not getting cars. They're wanting in that area. And when you have like a commercial building that is in like a downtown area that is walkable, then you don't have the other requirements that are needed. And so as long as that we look at affordability of those as well. Sometimes with plumbing and things, changing the commercial building into multifamily do run different obstacles than you do just on a regular build. So.
And that's good. And like maybe the Starks and stuff that kind of primed out for that. Some may not be, and it kind of pushed me to the other is, Kentucky, we've done a really good job of job creation. Where we need people, really willing, ready workforce. And so I know we've had some discussion on immigration and other things, but we want people here. We just got to make sure we have the housing in place to develop, right, because it helps us grow. So I think that's a positive, and making sure that we do have those housing so that we don't have additional homeless and all those. So I appreciate your help.
Right. Well, I mean, when you have a new employer, wanting to come to an area, I mean, one of the major things that they look at is, is there housing for the people that I'm going to employ? And so that's, one of the first things to look at. And Bowling Green is just exploding down there from a lot of commutes from Nashville. And so they have growing pains as well. And so, but it's just a focus that, we need all types of housing. And there's not one particular type of housing that, we should focus on. It needs to be focused that we all, come together and we build to meet that demand. Yep.
All right, our final question is from landlord and Senator Higdon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hadn't thought about myself that way today, but I am somewhat knowledgeable on the subject. As a lot of pressures on the building industry. We talk about the materials, labor, supplies, infrastructure, interest rates, all that increasing the cost per square foot. Do you see a trend to keep especially on multi-unit and affordable? Do you see a trend going back towards smaller units, reducing the square footage of units to help reduce the cost?
Yeah, of course. When they look at what they're building, depending on the amount of units that they want to get within that piece of land that they have, to bring that cost down. But what happens is when they get delayed with the permitting process, or there's long delays, there's long time goes them getting approved, then that just adds to the overall amount that project's going to cost. When you have legal fees, when you have all those other things that come up, it just adds on. And so when you don't streamline the permitting process and get these people approved and get them started, over time you're adding to where it no longer can be feasible as affordable housing, because the overall cost has risen so much that they can't make it work. So
follow up real quick.
Yep.
I guess I'm primarily talking about as the size of the units themselves, reducing the square footage from 1,000 square foot to 540 square foot, something that works. Do you see a trend toward that to keep the price affordable?
Yes, and we're seeing kind of more unique floor plans. We're seeing a lot of office spaces coming up in that they want in the rental units, but we are definitely seeing a trend of a smaller unit, and a lot of those smaller units we're seeing do come into the commercial buildings that we're seeing, the lofts. And so, that being said, we still have a lot of families that rent. And so, how do we, yes, we can make a unit smaller and try and get more into that building, but then we still have the larger families that we've got to have units for, that we need to keep affordable, so that they're able to live there affordably versus, the people that are taking the smaller units. So did I answer your question?
Well, somewhat, but I think we're seeing I'm seeing that to keep things affordable, I'm seeing multi-generations of families in the same unit now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Carey, thank you so much for your presentation. It was very, we touched on a lot of issues that we've been talking about over the last several months, and thank you for giving us the statistics, and it was a very good presentation. All right, we have one more presenter today, and it's Logan Haynes. He's with the Manufactured Housing Institute. Logan, if you could give us about 10 to 15 minutes and a little bit of time for questions, that'd be awesome. However you can squeeze it in. We just don't want to lose anybody.
Absolutely. I'll try to go as quick as I can and make sure you don't fall asleep or anything like that.
We won't. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me. My name is Logan Haynes. I'm the executive director of the Kentucky Manufactured Housing Institute. We're a trade association based here in Frankfort. And I just want to dive in. I don't want to dwell too much on the things that you already know, right? But I do want to just put a bow on a couple of things of the affordable housing crisis before I dive into how I think and how our industry thinks that we can be not the solution, but a key solution. So just most recent data, Fayette County is an example of this affordable housing crisis. 2015 housing needs assessment dictated that there were 6,600 households that couldn't find housing within their means. Since then, approximately 400 units, 400 affordable homes are purchased, rehabbed, flipped, and then when they're priced out of that affordability. And so they're going in the hole 400 units per year. Fayette County is projecting a 1.2% population growth, and so because of that, their data show that they needed 1,700 new homes a year. 2018, when they did the study, only 1,200 were actually built. And so there you're going in the hole 500 homes. So 400 homes are being flipped, priced out of affordability. 500 homes are not being built to meet demand. Louisville, as you all have heard, did a housing needs assessment back in 2018. They determined that they were short 31,412 units. And so they looked at what can they do to address it with a financial component. And they realized it was going to cost them $3.5 billion. And so, this isn't just a city issue, as you all well know. This is a rural issue. This is from one end of the state to the other, and from one end of the country to the other. So this is not new. And there's a couple reasons why that is. If you look at the Census Bureau's report that they did, you go back to the year 2000, and they've tracked homes that were 1,400 square feet or less. So when you think of 1,400 square feet, you think of affordability. So you go back to the year 2000, it was around 18% of the homes that were being built were at that 1,400 square feet or less. As of 2020, that's around 5%. And so my background is site built. I've been in the manufactured housing industry now for several years, but traditionally over 20 years, my background has been site built. And I can tell you that as a former site builder, you're not incentivized to build an affordable home. You heard that today with Anitha and the Home Builders Association. There's a need for that partnership. And so you're not incentivized, which is why you're seeing those numbers dwindle. And it's not just affecting the end consumer. It's not just affecting the individual that's wanting to buy a home. It's also, as you all know, affecting employers. This is the Bowen National Research Group, part of KHC's housing study that they did. And they asked employers, they said, have local housing issues adversely impacted your business in the last couple of years? And 55% said, yes, absolutely they have. And so they said, well, if the local area could add more housing, would you be likely to add more employees? And nearly 2/3 indicated that they would be much more likely or somewhat more likely to add more employees. And so we hear that saying all the time that homes are where jobs go to sleep at night. And I feel like this legislature, as has been said today, does such a good job of attracting business into our state. But we have to do something with housing, right? Because without those housing units, jobs have nowhere to sleep, right? And so it begs the question, why are we here? People think of many things when they think of the manufactured housing industry. I'm sure many of you, when you saw this on the agenda, you had several thoughts yourself. I can tell you my dad was a drill sergeant during Vietnam, and so my feelings aren't easily hurt, but I've heard some pretty amazing things when I have these conversations about manufactured housing. And so I want to dive into some of those today, but first, what is it? What is it not? So just a couple of definitions. When you look at manufactured homes, a lot of people think of the terms trailers or mobile homes. Just by legal definition, there has not been a mobile home built since 1976. So 1976 is when HUD stepped in. They created what is called the HUD Code, and they actually started creating safety regulations about how these homes were going to be built. And so one thing you won't hear me say is that the stigma and the reputation that this industry have is not just. We earned it, right? For a long time, we earned it. It was about how quick you could build it. It was about how fast you could build it. It was about how cheaply you could build it. And because of that, we earned a poor reputation. But I can tell you, since the adoption of that HUD code in 76, installation guidelines shortly thereafter, how far this industry has come is amazing. even just in the last 5 to 10 years, over the decades, this HUD code has been thrown out, redone, revised, so much so that it's neck and neck with that of site-built homes when you look at the actual code of what's being built. And so again, mobile homes, that's pre-1976. There are no mobile homes being built today. Now they're called manufactured homes. Okay, again, that's what we call a HUD code home or a manufactured home. And then you have modular. A lot of people think that manufactured home and modular homes are synonymous. Those are two different things. Modular was far superior, and that is true. My association, we represent both modular and manufactured. Modular homes are built to the local building code. So our case, the 2018 Kentucky Residential Code. And so you have one that's built to the Kentucky Code, one that's built to the federal code. One was far greater. Today, that's not the case anymore. And that's not a testament to the residential code not growing. It's a testament to how far the HUD code has grown from a quality perspective. And so many of our manufacturers, when you get on their website, you'll actually see floor plans and elevations and these beautiful pictures of homes, and you'll see on it that they can either purchase that exact home with the same inputs, with the same cosmetic features, with the same studs, the same outlets, the same appliances as either a HUD code or a modular code home. The only difference is that process and underneath that home. When you crawl underneath the home, you'll see a metal I-beam that runs the full length of that home. During transport of that home being shipped from the factory, that is used as the chassis. Despite what it used to look like, those wheels come off, that tongue comes off of the home, and it's a metal I-beam support. You think of site building a big garage. You don't want a bunch of posts in the middle of your garage. What are you going to use to do that? You're going to use a steel beam, right? All of these homes had that steel beam built onto that home. So the quality is certainly there. And so, in having these conversations with various groups around the state, I hear some of the same concerns that manufactured homes are not safe. Somehow tornadoes are scientifically attracted to them. We're not sure how that works. Manufactured homes will depreciate in value. Dave Ramsey loves to talk about that, right? Love Dave Ramsey. He's a little wrong. We'll talk about that. Manufactured homes don't last. They just don't hold up. That manufactured homes really aren't affordable. And the biggest, most common thing about it is, well, they're fine, but I wouldn't want one in my community or in my backyard. And so let's just dive into each one of those. So manufactured homes aren't safe. So a couple of things there. When you look at the safety of the homes from a construction standpoint, again, they're built to the HUD code. That HUD code's been around since '76. It's been redone. But it wasn't until 2019 that in Kentucky, every single one of those HUD code homes are inspected twice by the state. It's been a long time that they've been inspected at the factory level by HUD regulated or third-party inspectors at the factory level. But in 2019, that's when 100% of the new manufactured homes were inspected by a state DHBC inspector twice. Once prior to that home being set at the footer level, that home's being placed on a permanent footing, goes down to the frost depth, filled with the same concrete that's going underneath your site-built home. That started in 2019. And then there's a final inspection that's done as well. And so you have the construction inspection at the factory. You have an installation inspection there on site twice. And you think about manufactured housing as a whole, the number one state in the country for manufactured housing is Florida. What's Florida have that we don't? Hurricanes, right? And so those same inspection schedules and regiments that have happened in Florida for decades, it wasn't until 2019 that those requirements really came to Kentucky based off of the regulation. So that regulation is outlined in 815 KAR 25090 that talks about that permanent foundation and then later talks about that installation inspection. So that talks about the safety. The other thing is manufactured homes depreciate. It was brought up today that generational wealth is important, actually investing in a home that's going to increase in value over time. And 2018, the FHFA, the Federal Housing Finance Agency, did a study comparing site-built homes to manufactured HUD code homes. And they found that these homes actually do appreciate at the same value, not depreciate, but appreciate when they're attached to land and converted to real property. And so you see an appreciation there, thus the ability to create generational wealth. Manufactured homes don't last. That's another big misconception, that as soon as you quote unquote drive it off the lot, then it's going to start to break down on you. It's also not true. Census Bureau did a study going back to the 70s that looked at homes after a decade. They wanted to see site-built compared to manufactured homes. What percentage of those homes were deemed inadequate? And so the purple or dark-colored bar there that you'll see is a manufactured home. Orange is a site-built home. And you can see going back to homes that were built in the 70s, again, that's right when the HUD code came to be, there was a little bit of a difference, a little over 6% for site-built compared to a little over 9% for manufactured homes. You see that difference shrinking significantly. In the 90s, it actually even flipped, that manufactured homes performed better than site-built. And so now you can see it's right neck and neck, and these are homes that were built 2000 to 2004, prior to this kind of industrial revolution, if you will, in the industry. And so we are seeing these homes perform well over time. And again, the factory and the inspectors at that factory are ensuring that the construction proves that, and then DHBC state inspectors are proving that here. And when you look at those DHBC state inspectors, you've got 120 counties across the state compared to a site-built inspection. A lot of those counties don't have a site inspector for a traditional site-built home. With manufactured housing, it does not matter what county it is. It does not matter how big of a land bank you've got, 1,000 acres. There's no farm exemption. There's no, I watched it on YouTube and I can figure it out exemption. None of that. 100% of the new manufactured homes that are set in Kentucky are inspected twice by the state. And so the homes do last. Next is the affordability. Okay, how can it be more affordable? A couple things. One, you've got buying power. You look at the overall price. Site-built, this is as of Q2 of this year in the United States. Average site-built home cost around $501,700. I think it was mentioned today for a typical site builder for a starter home was around $400,000 here in Kentucky, and Anitha brought up 260 or so thousand. And so some expensive starter homes at the very minimum. Manufactured homes last year, the average cost was $127,970. Single section was $86,000, a multi-section was $159,000. And so how is that? Again, you've got buying power. As a site builder, a great year for me was a few homes, right? As a mom and pop site builder. Clayton Homes, one of our larger members, they built almost 64,000 homes last year. Who's going to get a better deal on a 2x4? They are. So much so that not only are they going to get a better deal, they bought the lumber yard, they bought the tree mill, they bought the window plant. Everything's vertically integrated so that they don't have those additional costs, which leads to the supply chain. They don't run into a lot of those same supply chain issues that site builders will. You also have efficiency. Primary example of this, last year, we set up a house at the Kentucky League of Cities Conference. There's actually one being set right now as we speak at that conference in Lexington. But from the time that house was a pile of lumber in the factory to the time that they were moving that house, moving furniture in that house on the loading dock at Rupp Arena, it was 4 days. Now, that's not typical. If a customer wanted to purchase a home, it's not 4 days later that they're handing the keys, but that does go to show you the capabilities if that were needed. And so you have efficiency. With that efficiency, you think about the traditional site-built home. How many subs are needed? That's one of the biggest reasons I got out of building, was because you would have subs that you would hire that would say, hey, I didn't finish the job, I'll have to come back in a week. And then it would be 3 weeks. And that's 3 weeks without that home being worked on whatsoever. And so there's significant challenges that inside of a factory setting you don't run into. And so you have efficiency, whether it be labor, whether it be speed. And then you also have little to no waste. You think about a site-built home that's 2,000 square feet. I know because I've seen it. You'll fill up a couple of large dumpsters with the waste of building that home, plus have a burn pile that you may or may not supposed to have, right? With a 2,000 square foot manufactured home, every bit of the waste of the construction of that home literally fits inside of a 55-gallon trash can. And so, again, that drives that cost down significantly. And so that's why you're seeing these homes be affordable, because it always begs the question, well, if it's the same studs, if it's the same outlets, if it's the same inputs, how is it more affordable? That's how. So then it begs the question, Well, would you want these homes, right? Would you want to see these homes in your backyard or in your neighborhood? Because it always boils down to that. We can talk about the safety. We can provide data on the financing, on the lending, on the value increase. We can provide all the numbers that support that. But then it always boils down to, well, those are fine, but I don't want them in my community, right? And so you all are all on Housing Task Force, so you're somewhat familiar with housing, if not very familiar, because I've talked to many of you before. There's two pictures on the screen. One of them is a site-built. One of them is a HUD code manufactured home. Obviously, we're not going to go back and forth, but just in your mind, you tell me which one is the manufactured home. It's the one on the right. And so you're looking at that, you're going, well, that doesn't look like those 7-foot ceilings that I remember seeing in my grandmother's mobile home that I saw when I was a kid. See that coffered ceiling, you see real ceramic tile, real appliances. That's how far the industry's come. Same thing here. Manufactured home is the one on the left. Again, real ceramic tile, real nice bathtub. The one on the right is a site built. But then it boils down to the exterior. What's the exterior of the home look like? Because people aren't going to see how nice the kitchen or the bathroom is if they're driving down the road. So which one is the site built? The manufactured home is the one on the left. The site built is the one on the right. You look at this one, same house obviously on the left, that's the manufactured. The house on the left that's the manufactured would not be allowed in the subdivision of the house on the right simply because of an outdated stigma and an outdated perception that, again, was rightfully earned but should no longer exist. This picture, the house on the left, was actually the cover photo of Louisville's housing needs assessment back in 2018. It's a Habitat for Humanity house. And we partner with Habitat, different parts of the country, working on some projects here in Kentucky as well. And so we've gotten to build a little bit of a relationship with them. And I've asked them if a for-profit builder was going to build that house, what would it cost? And their answer was around $300,000 to $350,000. Most places in Kentucky, that's not an affordable home. The house on the right is a HUD code manufactured home that in most places in Kentucky would be deemed an affordable home. House on the left is a house in Lexington that was affordable, then it was purchased, flipped, and priced again. And when it was priced again, it was no longer by definition an affordable home. House on the right is a HUD code manufactured home that would be an affordable home. And so the industry looks drastically different. Here's just a little bit of an example of just some walkthroughs of that. And these are HUD code manufactured homes. These aren't even modular homes. But you can see granite countertops, ceramic tile, steep roof pitches, fireplaces, and so some significant changes to what people think of when they think of mobile homes or even manufactured homes. And so if you take away anything today, I hope it's that you take away the versatility, right? It's the versatility of the industry. We still have that ability to build a cosmetically simple design, but we also have the versatility to meet what either that consumer needs or what that municipality needs. And so Trifecta Research, which is a national research firm that conducted surveys specifically here in Kentucky, showed some of these pictures and surveyed Kentucky citizens. And so if you got any of those wrong, you're not alone. Only 11% of the people got it right as far as which home was which. On the exterior, 16% got it right on the interior. And so anymore, unless you walk under the home, you can't tell whether or not it's a site-built or whether or not it is a manufactured home. Some of the comments I think are interesting that people left in taking this survey. When you look at what people think of, I always heard as a kid, never confuse passion with knowledge. And some people were really passionate about some of their answers. You look at the exterior, it says on figure A, which again is the site-built home, it says figure A looks a bit thin and feels like the walls are spliced together, while figure B shows that the pillars of the house look thick and sturdy like those built on site. So those nice things that they're saying are actually about a HUD code manufactured home. And so again, we still have the ability to build that simplistic design. If you see, homes going down the road that look simple, it's because there's still a need for those homes, right? There's still a need for a cosmetically simple home. But I want to make sure that you don't confuse cosmetically pleasing with quality, because those are two different things. just because it looks simple and it may not be something that you would want to live in, doesn't mean that it's not safe and doesn't mean that it's not of quality. Home on the Right is one of our more affordable manufacturers here in the state. Just to give you an idea, their bare minimum construction is a 2x6 exterior wall with a R40 insulation in the ceiling, an R19 in the walls, and then an R22 in the floors with an option of an R33. And so not only are they built well, they're energy efficient. In Kentucky, 70%, 75% of the homes placed in Kentucky, manufactured homes placed in Kentucky, are Clayton homes. As of January of this year, every single Clayton home is net zero ready. And so by DOE definition. So that tells you that you don't have that second mortgage of utility bills. And so the energy efficiency is also there. So then you look at who's interested. Again, would you want these homes in your area? Part of that trifecta research, they pulled the data based off of all the survey takers, and they determined that of everybody that took the survey about housing, 18% said that they would consider a manufactured home. You multiply that out based off just the population in Kentucky, that's 318,000 people that would consider a manufactured home within the next 12 months. You dissect that even more to just everybody that's considering a home purchase in the next 12 months. 62% of those that are considering a home purchase in the next 12 months would consider a manufactured home, compared to 70% would consider a site-built single-family home. And so it's more neck and neck when what people would actually even consider, whereas before people would say, no, I don't want to live in a trailer. I don't want to live in a mobile home. That perception is changing drastically, and it's time that policy change with it as well. And so create some new terms. They're seeing this versatility, and so because of that, just within the last few years, there's some new terms that have come out. Again, you've got modular construction that's built to the site-built code. You've got HUD code manufactured housing that's built to the federal code. Underneath that HUD code definition, there's some new terms called cross-mod or MH Advantage or Choice MH. These aren't really construction terms or that they're going to be built any safer or anything of the sort. These are cosmetic requirements that Fannie and Freddie created, and now FHA, to allow for site-built comps when it comes time for appraisal. Traditionally, when appraisers would appraise a HUD code manufactured home, they would have to go and find other HUD code manufactured homes, which presents challenges, because if the other one in the area is a 15-year-old HUD code manufactured home, it doesn't reflect all of the changes of the industry, which dramatically affects the appraised value. Whereas these homes, the industry's come so far that the lenders are saying, we don't even want you to appraise it next to another HUD code manufactured home. If it's a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,800 square foot cross-mod or MH Advantage or Choice MH, find another site built that meets those same specs. And so that's a testament to how far this industry has come. Just to show you how these homes look like being set up, site work looks very similar to that of a site built. This is a home down in Tennessee, so their frost depth isn't quite as deep as ours, but same concrete that goes underneath that of a site-built home. Home is transported down the road in sections so that it fits under the power lines and the utilities. You can see that home, the roof is actually laying down. It's called a hinge roof. This one is it's being crane set. You can see where it gets that name from. You don't have to set these homes that way. You can actually just roll them into place and then build the foundation up to them. You can see that roof standing up. That's how the homes get that high-pitched roof. The two halves are married together, and in these cases, with the garage is built there on site. And so the goal is, when you pull in the driveway, you can't tell that these aren't site-built homes. And so, again, the industry's come so far, but that doesn't mean that we're not still facing challenges. You know, we've talked a lot about over the course of these task force meetings. Here's all the issues that we're facing as a state, and every state's having these conversations, every city's having these conversations, and it boils down to, okay, here's the issue, what's going to be the solution? And so many times, cities that I work with and try to help through this problem, they all start with the same way. They try to reinvent the wheel. Well, let's look at shipping containers. How can we convert these to homes? Let's look at, all these different things that are outside of the box, and then they come down to, well, how do we regulate it from a code and safety standpoint, and then how do we regulate it based off of the cosmetic look? Whereas this industry has been regulated for a long time. It's regulated here in Kentucky, and it has now that customization when it comes to that cosmetic feel. And so obstacles that we do face, though, is one, sales tax on HUD code homes. So here in Kentucky, we're one of the few states in the country that when an individual goes to buy a HUD code manufactured home, whatever that price is, we add 6% to it. So rather than individual building components, which, most of our manufacturers for HUD code are outside of the state. We only have one manufacturer in the state that builds HUD code. So the overwhelming majority, 95% of the homes that are HUD code are shipped into the state. So they're having to pay sales tax on the components of those homes in other states in many cases. And then when that home is sold here, that consumer is automatically getting a 6% surplus on top of that bill. So that's one issue. Another issue is an inability to replace homes due to restrictive zoning. And notice I say replace there. The reason I say that is because in many cases, someone will have purchased an older manufactured home and they've lived in it for decades. And since then, zoning has been adopted or zoning changes have been amended to where you can't bring a new manufactured home in. Well, that individual can't afford a new site-built home, and they have no desire to rent. And so they're locked into this potentially old, dilapidated, true mobile home because their ordinances don't allow them to replace it, right? So that's one issue. The other issue is the restrictive zoning ordinances, again, rooting in that outdated stigma. And so the picture that I showed you of the site-built that wouldn't be allowed in the neighborhood, or the manufactured home that wouldn't be allowed in the neighborhood of that of the site-built, even though they look almost identical, is a testament to the outdated NIMBYism of so many different municipalities across the state. Now, they're coming a long way. I can tell you since we placed that house at the Kentucky League of Cities last year, we had several other legislators at our Louisville Home Show that's a trade show a couple years ago. The response has been overwhelming. People wanting and organizations and municipalities wanting to change their ordinances. But for so many that don't show up to that conversation, they still base it off of outdated ideas and outdated perceptions. But some are adjusting it. This is a quote from the mayor of London, who just broke ground on a subdivision of 51 HUD code manufactured homes. And he says, we have to find a solution as leaders, right? He said, how do I find that solution? It's by partnering with people like Clayton Homes to be able to offer an affordable option. We've looked at many other places. Stop thinking something because of an old stigma. Investigate, look at the quality of it, and understand that it's totally different. It's totally changed. And so that's a testament to how far the industry's come, because it wasn't all that long ago that some of our industry members were in a lawsuit with the city of London because they weren't allowing manufactured homes. Now the mayor is showing up to a groundbreaking of a subdivision, not a land lease community, but a subdivision of these homes, saying that this is going to be one of London's solutions to fix the problem. Others, City of Versailles, I've been serving on a task force with the City of Versailles and other cities around the state as well, but they're doing a pilot project because they want to show their citizens in Versailles that this industry is not the big bad wolf that many people think that it is, that it's not just a bunch of trailers and mobile homes, but instead it's high quality looking homes. And so this is the house that is right now, as we speak, being set up on the loading dock at Rupp Arena for city officials to walk through, that will be having furniture moved into it on Wednesday morning, and then on Thursday afternoon, the home will be taken apart, and then it will go to Versailles and set up as a permanent residence that will be open for the public for about 6 weeks, and then it will be sold again as a permanent residence. Just a couple of, real quick, some of the housing in practice, factory-built housing in practice. Here's this development that's going in London. This is what some of those homes are going to look like. So they have broken ground. They broke ground earlier in the year. Should be placing a home within the next few weeks, the first home. Some other states have addressed this issue as well. You heard Anitha talk about Indiana. They're kind of leading the charge, it seems like, in so many of these housing solutions. They enrolled a piece of legislation that went into effect in July of this year that said that local units of government may not preclude manufactured homes on private property if the home meets certain standards cosmetically, whether it be roofing, siding, roof pitch, and other things that are outlined in that. And so again, people are recognizing, all right, it's not the value issue, it's not the safety issue, it's not the construction issue, it's just outdated stigma. And so places are taking charge of that. You also heard about multifamily. Multifamily is also not new to this industry. We're seeing more and more of it. There's a new factory now in Louisville that should be starting to produce units any day if they're not already today. That's one of our members called MMY. Their bread and butter is multifamily. These are some of their units that you can see there. So you can see some 8 and 9 plexes. They actually did a 30-story unit in Brooklyn not too long ago. And so it's a international company, but they've decided to make their U.S. headquarters here in Kentucky in Louisville, so we're excited to have them in the state. Again, just more renderings of what those units are going to be. Their goal is here just really soon to start producing around 5 of these units per week. So again, you've got that scalability. This is another manufacturer, Skyline Champion, that's doing some multifamily duplexes. This is up in Ohio. And so you see entire developments of those. So some good-looking duplexes, good-looking homes. Some single-family. These are 41 homes that were for sale in Asheville, which if you saw that graph earlier from the chamber, you saw a lot of folks kind of flocking to that area, and so they have a major housing shortage. I'm not sure what's going on with the TV. I don't think that's me. But if you could see it right now, you would see some really, really beautiful homes on the screen. Is that me or is that the TV? Okay. And so just quickly, in summary, some myths and negative perceptions. 22 million Americans live in a factory-built home today. That number is growing. Again, pre-76 homes weren't regulated. That's where we earned our stigma. Post-76 HUD code, that's when quality started to take place. And those overhauls have really made a difference even just in the last few years. Again, 100% of the homes in Kentucky are going to be inspected by the state. Even the term mobile home, even if you were to call these mobile homes, mobile is a misnomer. 90% of these homes, once they're placed, never move again. The 10% that do typically are in land lease communities. And again, the homes don't go down in value. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Very good. Thank you so much, Logan, for your presentation. Representative Clines has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Logan, in January of 2023, I attended the Manufactured Housing Expo in Louisville, and I was blown away by both the quality and the appearance of today's modern manufactured home. So I understand you kind of followed up from that event with some groups, including the cities and the counties. How's the response been?
Yeah, the response it has been overwhelming. We opened this house up for city officials. We held the advocacy reception for legislators a couple years ago. We did another advocacy reception this past January where we had not only city officials, but we had different nonprofits, different housing stakeholders attend. This show isn't a public show. This is a private industry show, but we opened it up to just housing stakeholders on the day before the show opened. And I can tell you this year we had about 150 different folks that came and were interested in how this could be a solution to the problem. The other thing that I would tell you, Anita and I, with Home Builders Association, a lot of people see us as competition. We're not at all. We have so many of her members are coming to our association going, we want this to be a solution. Our fastest growing segments in our industry, one are lenders because they're seeing that it's going to increase in value and that there's the same amount of risk now as that of site built. But 2 are developers because again, developers aren't incentivized to build affordable homes. And so they're coming into this industry going, this is going to be a solution. We're going to be able to make a change and address the problem that's out there nationwide.
Very good. Any other questions for Logan? All right. Thank you so much for your testimony. I think we had 3 very good presentations today. And just to let you know what's coming forward, October 21st is our final meeting to take on testimony. And then November, we will get back together and have a document that hopefully we'll have in front of you several days so you can read and see if there's any corrections or anything and then adopt. our report in November. So thank you to the presenters today. Thank you to the panel members and committee members that are here listening and taking in the information. If there's not any other questions, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.